This past Thanksgiving, my wealthy son stopped by and surprised me with a question. How are you liking the lake house I gifted you, Mom? My heart dropped. What lake house? I responded in disbelief. I never received one. Just then, his wife, my daughter-in-law, elegant but calculating, strolled up beside him. I'm so glad we could visit, she said sweetly. But what happened next would unravel everything I believed about my family and my life. For 2 long years, I had been barely scraping by on my janitorial wages, stretching out medication, skipping meals, and surviving brutal winters in a threadbare coat. I kept telling myself things would eventually turn around. My son, David, had risen to prominence, launching a successful tech consultancy with over 200 employees. At only 35, he was thriving. I adored him, even if our chats had dwindled into brief, surface-level check-ins filled with business updates. Since my husband's passing 3 years ago, David had buried himself in work. I tried to be understanding. Everyone handles grief in their own way. That morning, my home carried a different energy. I'd cooked all his favorite dishes, even though it meant sacrificing my own meals for the next several days. My tiny kitchen was overflowing with pots, but I was determined to make everything just right. It had been months since I'd last seen him in person. When David finally stepped inside, I was struck by how refined he looked. His watch, his shoes, even his laid-back sweater probably cost more than I earn in a month. Right behind him came Victoria, his wife of 3 years, dressed impeccably in a winter white coat, her blonde curls untouched by the wind. Mom, everything smells amazing, David said warmly, giving me a quick hug before helping Victoria with her coat. She gave me her usual polished smile, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. We sat for dinner, and as David spoke about expanding his company to the West Coast, Victoria added anecdotes about luxury trips and their latest home upgrades. I nodded along, the gulf between our lives widening with each word. Then, as I was slicing the pumpkin pie, David leaned back with a smile. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Mom, he began. I paused, pie server in hand. How's the lake house I got you 2 years ago? I know how much you've always loved being near the water. His words chilled me to the bone. Lake house? I repeated, stunned. My mind reeled. David. I never received a lake house. His smile faded, and he turned toward Victoria, who had suddenly stiffened. The property on Lake Morrison, he insisted. I transferred it to your name for your birthday, 2 years ago. Are you sure you don't remember? Shaking my head slowly, I felt the blood drain from my face. I'd remember something like that. Are you certain you didn't give it to someone else? Abruptly, Victoria stood, her napkin dropping to the floor. Oh. I forgot, I have to make a call about tomorrow's appointment, she said, voice pitched unnaturally high. She rushed to the kitchen, phone in hand, something clearly amiss in her urgency. David, now visibly concerned, furrowed his brow. Mom, that's impossible. My assistant handled all the details, the deed, the mailings, even monthly payments. I blinked. Monthly payments? Yes, $1,500 a month, to help you with expenses. For the last 2 years. I nearly collapsed. $36,000. Enough to change my life. Enough for food, medicine, even car repairs. My knees wobbled. David, I've never received any money. I've had to choose between heat and groceries. I had to have my blood pressure pills last month. His face turned pale. He stood quickly, his chair screeching against the floor. That's not possible. I have transaction receipts, bank records. It should all be traceable. From the kitchen, I could hear Victoria's hushed, frantic voice. My hands were trembling now. Show me, I whispered. I want to see it all. David was already scrolling through his phone, eyes scanning rapidly. Everything was sent. If you didn't get the money, then, where did it go? We both turned toward the kitchen, where silence had suddenly replaced Victoria's voice. I stood, my legs barely holding me, and stepped toward the doorway. Victoria stood with her back to us, phone pressed to her ear, though she wasn't speaking. When she sensed our presence, she spun around, her face flushed. Everything okay? David asked, but the edge in his voice had changed. It was the same tone he used in tough negotiations, serious, sharp, probing. Victoria offered a forced smile. Just confirming our dinner plans for tomorrow. But her body betrayed her, avoiding eye contact, twisting her ring nervously. Victoria, David said cautiously. Do you recall anything about the lake house paperwork? You coordinated a lot back then. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The silence stretched unbearably. I watched her eyes dart between us, her hands tightening until her fingers went white. I spoke then, calm but firm. Where is my lake house? She stammered, suggesting it could be a mailing error, or maybe a banking glitch. But I saw through her. Years of working night shifts cleaning office buildings had sharpened my instincts. People talk freely when they think you're invisible. And Victoria? She was lying. David pulled out his phone again. I'm calling Rebecca, my assistant. Victoria stepped forward quickly. Wait. Maybe we should discuss this in private. Your mom's already overwhelmed. Too late for that, I said. I want the truth. On speaker, Rebecca's voice came through clearly. Yes, Mr. Harrison. The property at 1247 Lake Morrison Drive was transferred to Margaret Harrison 2 years ago. I have all the signed documents on file. My heart pounded. That was my name. But I'd never seen or signed a deed. And the monthly payments? David asked. All delivered like clockwork, $1,500 each month to the account provided, under Margaret Harrison. Routing number ending in 4782. That's not my account, I said quietly. Mine ends in 9156. David's eyes locked onto Victoria. Rebecca, what's the full account number? Rebecca read it aloud. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't mine, at all. And who gave you that number? David asked, his voice razor sharp now. Your wife, sir, came the answer. Mrs. Harrison called and said your mother had updated her banking information. She gave me the new account and the mailing address, which she said was 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. I felt a wave of disbelief. I'd never even been on Maple Street. David ended the call. The silence that followed was unbearable. He turned slowly to his wife. Explain. Tears welled in Victoria's eyes, but her face twisted more with fear than remorse. David, you have to understand, my parents were losing their home. My father's medical bills, it was all temporary. I was going to put it back. Temporary? I asked, my voice trembling. You stole from me. No, she said weakly, I didn't mean to. But the damage was done. Thanksgiving, once meant to bring us together, had revealed a betrayal that would tear us apart. Victoria was clearly lying, and not very convincingly. David pulled out his phone again. I'm calling Rebecca, my assistant, he said firmly. She managed everything personally. Victoria stepped forward quickly, her voice tightening. Wait, maybe we should talk about this in private first. Your mother's been through enough. If this is just a small misunderstanding, we don't want to upset her unnecessarily. A cold anger settled in my chest. Upset me more? I thought bitterly. I'd been eating peanut butter and crackers for dinner while she wore designer brands and flew to Europe. But I kept my tone even. Victoria, sweetie, I think we're past the point of worrying about upsetting me. I need to know what happened to the house. David was already on the call. In seconds, a woman's voice came through. Rebecca, it's David. Can you pull up the paperwork for the lake house I gave my mother 2 years ago? There was a pause. Then Rebecca responded, more clearly now that the call was on speaker. Of course, Mr. Harrison. The property at 1247 Lake Morrison Drive was officially transferred to Margaret Harrison on November 15, 2 years ago. I have all the signed documents on file. My heart pounded. That was my name. That was supposed to be my house. But I never signed anything. And the monthly transfers? David asked. All payments were made as instructed, $1,500 on the first of each month to the account on file under Margaret Harrison. Routing number ending in 4782. My breath caught in my throat. That's not my account, I said, my voice hollow. Mine ends in 9156. David's gaze shot to Victoria. Rebecca, can you give me the full account number? As she read out the digits, I saw the blood drain from Victoria's face. It wasn't my account. Not even close. And who gave you that account information? David asked quietly. Your wife, sir, Rebecca answered. Mrs. Harrison called in December 2 years ago. She said your mother's banking details had changed. She gave us the updated account and asked us to modify the records. David's hand trembled slightly as he held the phone. Victoria let out a strangled sound, a mix of panic and guilt. And where was the deed mailed? He asked. To the address your wife provided, 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. I felt like I'd been punched. I'd never lived there. I'd been in the same little house for a decade. David ended the call. The silence in the room grew thick, pressing down on all of us. When he looked at Victoria, his face was unreadable, but that blank stare was more chilling than any anger. Explain, he said, voice devoid of emotion. Victoria finally cracked. Tears poured down her face, but they seemed more frantic than sorrowful. You have to understand, she cried. My parents were about to lose their home. The medical bills were burying them. I only borrowed the money. It was never meant to be permanent. Borrowed? I said softly. You mean stole? No, she shouted. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed time. And the lake house, it wasn't like you were using it. I felt something deep inside me shatter. Not like I was using it. I echoed. Victoria, I've been working myself to exhaustion just to afford my blood pressure meds. I skip meals. I sit in the cold at night because I can't afford heat. And you're saying I wasn't using it? David stared at his wife like he no longer recognized her. My mother could have died, he said, his voice low and shaken. What if she needed a doctor and couldn't afford one? She didn't. Victoria snapped. She's okay. But my father, he has diabetes, heart problems. He needed the money more than she did. Her words hit me like a slap. Okay, she thought I was okay. She didn't see the nights I lay awake, fearing how I'd survive another week, wondering if skipping pills would finally catch up with me. Where is my house now? I asked, barely able to speak. Victoria wiped her smeared makeup with the back of her hand. My parents live there now. And my brother's family. They've been renovating it, making it nicer, with your money, David added coldly. Victoria nodded helplessly. I dropped into a chair, drained and numb. For 2 years, I believed David was just too busy for regular check-ins. I was proud that he didn't need me anymore. I convinced myself that his distance was normal, a sign of adulthood. But all this time, he thought I was safe. He thought I had everything I needed. David looked at me, his voice cracking. Mom. I'm sorry. I thought you were okay. I really thought I'd taken care of everything for you. I looked into his eyes and saw not the powerful businessman, but the boy who once promised to buy me a mansion someday. He meant to keep that promise, but he'd placed that trust in the wrong person. How much? I asked Victoria. How much of my money did you take? She was silent for a long time. Then, in a whisper. All of it. $36,000, gone. And a house worth at least $200,000 more. Her family had lived in comfort while I struggled to survive. David stood up, his every move calculated and slow. Victoria, pack your bags. I want you out of my house tonight. David, no, please, she sobbed, reaching for him. We can fix this. I'll make things right. I'll pay your mother back. He stepped away, his voice ice. With what money? You haven't worked a single day since we got married, David said coldly. Everything you own, everything your family's been enjoying, that all came from money you stole from my mother. I watched my daughter-in-law break down before me, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No vindication. Just an aching emptiness where trust used to live. She had looked me straight in the eyes for 2 years. Sat right at this kitchen table. Smiling. Laughing. All the while knowing I was scraping by while her family thrived on the very money that should have supported me. As her sobs echoed off the walls of my modest dining room, I realized this Thanksgiving would be memorable, but not for the reasons I'd imagined. It wouldn't be about a happy family meal. No, it would be remembered as the day I discovered that sometimes the people who wear the warmest smiles are hiding the deepest betrayals. After Victoria finally left that night, sobbing and pleading for forgiveness that neither David nor I could give, the house felt different. Still. But not in a peaceful way. The quiet was thick with unanswered questions, every shadow heavy with the sting of betrayal. David wanted to call his attorney immediately. But I stopped him. Not because I was reconsidering, but because I had a feeling we hadn't uncovered everything yet. Thieves don't usually steal just once. This had the smell of something much larger. Mom, you don't have to do anything, David said, sitting across from me, his expensive suit wrinkled from the long, exhausting day. Let me handle this. You've already been through too much. But I shook my head. For 2 years, I had been in the dark. A silent victim of Victoria's deception. I had felt powerless, unaware that she had been quietly draining away the little security I had left. Now that I knew, I couldn't stay silent. I need to see everything, I said. Every form, every bank statement, every signed paper. I need to understand exactly what she did to me. The next morning, while David went home to change and gather documents, I called out sick for the first time in 2 years. Mrs. Henderson, my supervisor, was surprised but understanding when I mentioned a family emergency. If only she knew the truth. When David returned, he brought boxes of paperwork and his laptop. We laid everything out on the same dining table where Victoria had once smiled and passed me mashed potatoes, pretending everything was fine. The first document we looked at was the deed to the lake house. My name was clearly signed. But as I stared at the page, something didn't feel right. This isn't my signature, I said, pointing to the scrawl. See the M in Margaret? I always make a little loop. This one's just sharp lines. David took a picture and compared it to an old birthday card I'd given him the year before. The difference wasn't glaring, but it was there if you knew what to look for. She forged it, he said flatly, anger simmering under his voice. We kept going. The bank records showed that the monthly payments from David had been going into an account under my name, but at a bank I'd never used in my life. I want to see that account, I said. David called the bank, but since he wasn't the account holder, they wouldn't give him any information. So we drove there together. My hands trembled as I walked through the pristine glass doors of First National Bank, my ID and Social Security card clutched tightly. The account had been opened 2 years and 1 month ago, just before the first payment David had arranged. The address on file? 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. The same one Rebecca had named. The phone number? Not mine either. The bank representative scrolled through the records, her brow furrowed. Ma'am, according to our system, you've never actually visited this branch before, correct? That's right, I said clearly. I've never stepped foot in here. She showed us the account signature card, the same forged signature. The same distorted version of my name. This is identity theft, she said, her tone now serious. You need to report this to the police immediately. But we weren't finished. David had brought along every transaction he'd made for what he believed was my care. Sitting in the small customer service room at the bank, a much darker picture started to emerge. The $1,500 monthly payments were only part of it. David had also sent extra money whenever he thought I needed it, $500 for glasses, $800 for dental work, $1,000 as a holiday gift. Every single cent had gone into the fake account. How much altogether? I asked, even though I was scared to hear it. David tapped numbers into his phone. His face went pale. $43,000, he whispered. Over the last 2 years, she stole $43,000 from you. I felt dizzy. That kind of money would have changed everything for me. It could have meant warmth in the winter, full meals, medications without stress. Peace of mind. Comfort. We drove to 847 Maple Street. It was an old, worn-out building in a struggling neighborhood, with cracked sidewalks and a flickering sign. Apartment 2B sat dark and vacant, a for rent notice posted in the window. She probably rented it long enough to set up the fake account, David muttered, his jaw clenched with fury. But my mind was on something else. David, I asked slowly, how did she even get my personal details? My social security number, date of birth, all the information she'd need to pull this off. He hesitated before answering. From our house. I keep copies of all our family's important documents in my home office. She would have had access to everything. Each new piece of the puzzle made the betrayal cut even deeper. Victoria hadn't just stumbled upon a chance to take advantage, she'd orchestrated this. She'd meticulously planned every step, stealing not only my identity but my future, all while living under my son's roof, eating meals at his table, and pretending to care about him. That night, as we sat among stacks of papers detailing her fraud, David looked over at me with eyes full of guilt. Mom, I'm so sorry. I believed her. I never once thought to double-check whether the money was reaching you. She was the one who suggested I send it in the first place. Those words stopped me cold. She suggested it? David gave a sad nod. It was around 6 months after Dad passed. She said she was really concerned about you being on your own. That helping with your finances would be a kind gesture, especially since business was doing well for us. She even offered to handle everything with Rebecca to get it all arranged. I closed my eyes, the weight of it all settling in. Victoria had made herself look like the thoughtful, caring daughter-in-law. She'd painted herself as a bridge between me and my son, concerned about my well-being, while siphoning every dollar meant for me into her own family's pockets. And the lake house, David added quietly. She told me you'd always dreamed of living near water, that it would be good for your health. She found the listing, negotiated the price, managed the paperwork. She hadn't just manipulated me, she'd used David's love and generosity like weapons against us both. She'd made him believe he was doing something kind while she stripped me of everything that kindness was supposed to provide. As David carefully packed up the documents for his attorney, I sat in silence, staring at the familiar walls of my tiny living room. For 2 years, This cramped, worn space with its second-hand furniture and failing AC had been my reality. But it was never meant to be this way. I should have been enjoying peace by the water, with enough money to cover my medical needs and small comforts. Instead, Victoria's parents were likely sitting in my rightful home, sipping coffee by the lake, basking in the quiet retirement I should have had. And all the while, I was rationing blood pressure pills and stretching every paycheck. Still, as painful as it was, the truth gave me something I hadn't had in years: clarity. Victoria had taken more than just cash. She'd robbed me of my dignity, my stability, and the reassurance that my son was looking out for me. Tomorrow, we'd start taking it all back. But tonight, I crawled into bed with something new in my chest: not peace, but power. For the first time in 2 years, I understood what had happened to me. The following morning, as I scrubbed the cold tile floors of the office building I'd worked in for the past 10 years, my body ached. My hands were cracked from harsh cleaning chemicals, and my knees throbbed. Still, I kept going. I needed every cent, or at least, I thought I did. At lunch, I returned a call from David's lawyer. "Mrs. Harrison," Mr. Patterson said gravely. "We need to meet right away. What we found goes far beyond what we imagined." David picked me up after my shift. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since Thanksgiving. He'd thrown himself into this investigation with the kind of intensity he usually saved for his biggest business deals. But this wasn't business, this was personal. At Mr. Patterson's office, we sat opposite a thick file of documents. "Victoria didn't just steal from you," he began. "She's been running a small fraud operation in your name." I felt the room spin. He explained that Victoria had used my information not just to open a single bank account, but 3, each at different banks. She'd taken out credit cards, secured a small personal loan, and even filed fraudulent tax returns under my name, claiming me as a dependent while reporting fake income. "The IRS has been trying to reach you about discrepancies in your tax filings," Mr. Patterson said. "They've been mailing notices to the fake address. You're currently under investigation for tax evasion." I was stunned. Tax evasion? I've filed honestly every single year. "We believe you," he said. "But the IRS doesn't know that yet. From their point of view, you've been receiving income that you didn't report." David's fists clenched. "How much in total?" Mr. Patterson reviewed the paperwork, adding in the original $43,000, credit card balances, loan amounts, and fraudulent tax returns. "Approximately $78,000, he said. The number hit me like a punch to the chest. $78,000. I earned less than $20,000 a year. She'd stolen more than 4 years of my life. "And the house?" David asked. "That's where it gets more complex," Mr. Patterson replied. "The property title is in your name, but the deed was forged. Victoria's family has lived there, made renovations using the stolen funds, and in doing so, increased its value." My mind went to her parents, people I'd only met briefly. They'd seemed harmless, maybe even a little overwhelmed by their daughter's upscale lifestyle. But had they known? Had they knowingly enjoyed the benefits of my son's generosity and my suffering? "Can we recover the property?" David asked. "Yes," the lawyer said. "But law enforcement needs to be involved now. This has moved far beyond a civil matter. We're talking criminal fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Victoria could face significant jail time." I sat quietly, thinking of the woman who had cried at my table days ago, asking for forgiveness. Was any of it real? Or was it just one more performance in a long line of manipulations? "What about her family?" I asked. "Her parents, her brother, the kids?" Mr. Patterson's eyes were kind, but resolute. "They'll have to vacate the property. If they can prove they had no knowledge of the fraud, they might avoid prosecution. But they can't keep anything bought with stolen money. David turned to the window, his jaw clenched tight. Where is she now? She's at the lake house, Mr. Patterson replied. Our investigator confirmed she's been staying there since she left your home on Thanksgiving. David's voice was bitter. Of course. She ran straight back to the people who'd been enjoying the life she stole from my mother. That afternoon, we drove to Lake Morrison. I had never seen the house before, the one that had been purchased in my name. When we pulled into the driveway, my breath caught. It was stunning. A sprawling, single-story home with wide windows looking out over the still water. Tall trees framed the property, and the garden was perfectly tended. This was the life David had wanted to give me. A calm, comfortable retirement by the lake, something to bring peace and dignity to my final years. Instead, I'd been left struggling in a hot apartment, barely scraping by. Victoria's father opened the door. The moment he saw us, his expression collapsed. We've been expecting you, he said softly. Victoria stood behind him, smaller than I'd ever seen her. Gone were the designer clothes. She wore jeans and an old sweatshirt. Her face was swollen from tears. Margaret, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I stared at Victoria, the same woman who had shared countless dinners with me, smiling and laughing, while quietly dismantling my financial life. But now, I felt no sympathy, only a cold, steady anger. Are you really sorry? I asked her, my voice sharper than I expected. Or are you just sorry you got caught? Her tears started again, but they didn't move me. I'd seen them before, believed in them even. I used to feel bad for her when David worked late and she seemed lonely. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. At first, I just borrowed the first payment to help my parents with their mortgage. I planned to put it back before anyone noticed. But you didn't, David cut in coldly. You kept taking more. You stole my mother's identity, forged tax documents, opened credit cards in her name. That's not borrowing, Victoria. That's criminal. Victoria's mother appeared behind her, eyes red and wet with tears. We had no idea, she said, her voice trembling. We thought David was just being generous, helping us during a hard time. Victoria told us he insisted on buying the house for us. I looked at this woman, about my age, maybe older, and saw raw disbelief in her expression. She hadn't known. None of them had. Only Victoria had been aware of the lies. The IRS thinks I'm a criminal because of what your daughter did, I said softly. I could go to jail for tax fraud. Victoria's mother gasped and pressed a hand to her mouth. Oh my God. Victoria, what have you done? But Victoria just cried harder, offering apologies that meant nothing now. She'd had 2 full years to tell the truth. Instead, she chose to keep digging the hole deeper. Mr. Patterson stepped forward, holding a case full of documents. Mrs. Stevens, he said firmly, your family will need to vacate this home within 30 days. Everything bought with stolen money must be returned or paid for. As I watched Victoria's family begin to process what was happening, I felt something unexpected, relief. Not vengeance, not triumph, just the deep breath of truth finally being acknowledged. The police will be here tomorrow to arrest Victoria, Mr. Patterson added. Turning herself in would be the smarter move. Victoria looked at David, eyes pleading. Please, she begged. Don't let them arrest me. I'll repay it. I'll get a job. I'll work day and night. David shook his head with quiet disappointment. With what skills, Victoria? You've never held a real job in your life. All you know how to do is take. As we left the lake house, I glanced back one last time. This was supposed to have been my home. And though it would be soon, it now felt different, stained by the betrayal that had taken it from me in the first place. Mom, David said gently as we drove away, "I'll make sure you're never in that position again. I'll take care of you the way I should have all along." I squeezed his hand. "You were taking care of me, sweetheart. Victoria just stole everything you gave." Still, as we drove back toward my cramped, aging house, I knew everything had changed. Victoria would finally face justice, and I'd soon have the comfort and stability David always intended for me. The confrontation had ended. What came next was justice. 3 months later, on a dull February Tuesday, the divorce was finalized. I sat beside David in the courthouse corridor as his lawyer walked out of the courtroom. "She signed everything without a fight," Mr. Patterson told us. "She's already been sentenced, 18 months for identity theft and fraud. Contesting the divorce would only increase legal costs she can't afford." "It's done," he continued. "The marriage is dissolved. All assets purchased with stolen money revert to the rightful owners. Mrs. Harrison, the lake house is now legally yours, and all accounts connected to the fraud have been frozen until restitution is completed." David exhaled deeply. "What about her family?" "They moved out last week," the lawyer said. "Her parents are staying with her brother for now. They've been cooperative. Honestly, I think they're horrified by what Victoria did." Relief filled me, mixed with sadness. The nightmare was ending, but innocent people had also suffered. Victoria's parents had lost their home and savings, collateral damage from their daughter's deceit. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal work, phone calls, and financial cleanup. David attacked every task with fierce determination. He hired accountants to unravel the tax fraud, worked closely with the IRS to clear my name, and ensured every piece of property was legally returned to me. But the biggest change wasn't the money, it was David. The man who used to be too busy to call became the son who stopped by just to talk, who drove me to appointments, who made sure I had everything I needed. "You don't have to hover," I told him one day while packing up the few belongings I wanted to take to the lake house. "I'm not going anywhere." He paused, hands on one of my handmade quilts. "Mom, I missed 2 years of your life because I trusted the wrong person. I'm not going to miss another minute." I understood his guilt, though I didn't think he deserved it. Victoria had manipulated everyone expertly, including him. Rebuilding trust, not just in others, but in himself, would take time. Moving into the lake house felt surreal. It was lovely, everything I could have hoped for, but I couldn't ignore the memories tied to it. Victoria's family had cared for it well. The garden thrived, the interior was spotless, and they'd even added a screened-in porch facing the water that I adored. Still, it felt like I was stepping into someone else's life. "We can change anything," David said as we walked through the rooms. "New paint, new furniture, whatever makes it feel like yours." I appreciated his kindness, but fresh curtains wouldn't erase the knowledge that while I was rationing blood pressure pills 50 miles away, Victoria's father had been drinking coffee in my living room. The financial part was even more complicated than I'd imagined. The fraudulent accounts contained David's payments, plus credit card charges and the loan proceeds. Sorting through it all required months of forensic accounting and paperwork. The good news, according to my new financial advisor, was that once the dust settled, I'd receive not only the money David had originally sent, but also accumulated interest, and some compensation for the identity theft. Once all the money was recovered, the total came to about $95,000, a sum I never dreamed of having. It was more than enough to live comfortably for many years, to put an end to the constant anxiety over affording medication or basic needs, and to truly enjoy my retirement instead of working until my health gave out. But despite the financial relief, the money didn't feel like a blessing. It carried the heavy weight of its origins, money that had been stolen, then returned. There was even a strange part of me that missed the predictability of my old life, even if it meant just scraping by. The most difficult part wasn't the legal mess or the money, it was the public attention. In a small town like ours, Victoria's arrest and trial were major news, and that meant everyone also knew what had happened to me. Some people were kind, offering sympathy and help. Others seemed skeptical, like they suspected I must have known more than I let on. And then there were those who thought I should be grateful, as if having my identity stolen was somehow a stroke of luck. "Well, at least you ended up with a lake house," one neighbor said cheerfully, and I wanted to scream. They didn't understand that what I'd gained came at the cost of betrayal, that someone I'd trusted had seen me as a target, not family. Still, I stayed quiet and focused on moving forward. My first night alone in the lake house, I sat on the screened porch, sipping tea while the sunset reflected on the water. It was beautiful, yet I felt disconnected, like I was intruding on someone else's life. David called, like he did every evening since I moved in. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked. I paused, trying to find the words. "Grateful," I said at last. "But also sad. And angry. And confused. Sometimes all at once." He understood. We talked about what Victoria had said, that she hadn't meant for it to go so far. And maybe she hadn't, at first. But that didn't excuse the choices she made afterward. Every lie, every theft, every opportunity to stop, she ignored them all. Her crimes had stolen more than money, they'd taken away years of connection between me and David, the peace of mind he'd tried so hard to give me. After the call, I wandered through the house that was now legally mine. It was everything I could have wanted, but it still felt like a crime scene more than a home. As I lay in the master bedroom, my bedroom, I didn't feel triumphant. Just drained. But it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes after surviving something long and painful. I knew the real healing would start the next day, as I began to make this house truly mine. A year later, I stood in that same porch, and everything had changed. What once felt foreign was now warm and familiar. I'd replaced the furniture, brought in plants I loved, and hung up pictures that told my story. My daily routine, coffee at sunrise by the water, had become sacred. I'd found a kind of peace I never thought I'd have. David arrived right on time for our weekly breakfast, carrying a bag from the local bakery. "I brought your favorite cinnamon rolls," he grinned. "You don't have to spoil me every week," I told him. "I can feed myself now." But he just smiled. I like doing it. The town that once gossiped now supported me. People asked how I was doing, brought meals when I first moved in, even the mailman made a point to deliver good news with a smile. When I asked about Victoria's appeal, David said it was just a formality. Her guilt was undeniable, and she'd already admitted to everything. She'd serve her full sentence. At first, 18 months felt like too short a punishment. But as time passed and I found my footing in this new life, I stopped thinking about her sentence and started focusing on my future. David asked how I felt about it all now. I paused, really thinking about it. A year ago, I might have wanted her to suffer more, to face consequences that matched the pain she caused. But now, sitting in this home that was truly mine, with my son beside me and my financial security finally intact, revenge didn't seem as important anymore. "I think she's exactly where she needs to be," I said quietly. "It's not that I want her to suffer. But I do believe she needs to truly face the consequences of what she did. Maybe prison will teach her something that we, her family, never could." During the court process, I learned more about Victoria's mindset than I ever wanted to know. She grew up in a financially struggling family, always comparing themselves to those with more. When she married David, she suddenly had access to comfort and stability, yet somehow, it still wasn't enough. She needed to feel like she was the one providing, solving problems, being the hero. According to a therapist her lawyer recommended, she suffers from something called entitlement syndrome. David told me a while ago that she truly believed she deserved anything she could take, that life owed her because she'd had a rough start. I've thought about that explanation a lot. Life had been unfair to me too. I lost my husband, I struggled financially, but I never saw that as an excuse to take from someone else. Have you heard anything about her family? I asked David one morning. He nodded. Her parents had moved in with a relative in Arizona. Her brother had relocated too, starting over in a different state. I felt a twinge of sympathy. Victoria's actions hadn't just damaged my life, they'd upended her own families as well. Her parents lost their savings and home. Her brother's children had to leave behind their schools and friends, all because she chose deceit over honesty. I've been thinking about writing them a letter, I said. David looked surprised. Really? What would you say? That I don't blame them. That I hope they're okay. I stirred sugar into my coffee and added, Victoria made her choices. They didn't deserve to suffer for them. We sat quietly for a while, watching ducks glide near the shore. Feeding them had become a part of my mornings, a small joy I never had time for when survival was my only focus. Then David's voice turned serious. I have something to tell you, he said. I've started seeing someone. Her name is Jennifer. I met her at a business conference. She's nothing like Victoria. I felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. Tell me about her, I said. She's a forensic accountant, he replied with a smile. She investigates financial fraud. She knows everything about what happened with Victoria and doesn't care about my money. She has her own successful career. I laughed. A forensic accountant? That's almost poetic. She's very honest, David added. Told me on our third date that I'm too trusting and need better boundaries. She sounds smart. When you're ready, I'd love to meet her, I told him. But take your time. I'm proud of you for going slow and learning to trust your instincts again. After he left, I went for a walk around the property. The gardens that Victoria's family had once planted were still blooming under my care, but I'd added my own touches, a vegetable patch, a cozy spot for reading, a bird feeder that attracted bright little visitors. The house had become mine in a deeper way. It was full of my routines, my memories, not just paperwork proving ownership, but emotional roots no one could pull out. Later that day, I made a call I'd been thinking about for weeks. I called Mrs. Henderson, my old boss at the cleaning company. This is Margaret Harrison. I wanted to let you know, I won't be coming back to work. There was a pause. Are you all right, Margaret? You've been gone for quite some time. I'm better than I've been in years, I said truthfully. I'm retiring. It felt surreal to say that word. I'd always imagined I'd work until my body gave out. But now, between the recovered money, the lake house, and David's renewed support, I finally had the freedom to stop working and start living. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sky turn golden and rose-colored over the water. My phone buzzed, a text from David. Jennifer wants to know if you like Italian food. She's planning to cook for you next weekend. I smiled and typed back, tell her I love Italian food. But she doesn't need to impress me, I already like anyone who makes my son happy. As night settled over the lake, I reflected on who I had been just a year ago, worn out, uncertain, quietly desperate. That version of me would never have believed how peaceful and secure life could become. Victoria had taken 2 years from me. But strangely enough, her betrayal also brought about things I might never have gained otherwise. It forced David to really see me, to understand that I didn't just need financial support, I needed him. His presence, his attention, his love. And I learned something about myself, too. I was stronger than I'd realized. I made it through the theft, the trial, the long road back to reclaiming my life. I found resilience I hadn't known I possessed. And I learned about forgiveness. Not for Victoria, that would take real change I may never see. But I forgave myself for trusting her. And I forgave David, who had been just as fooled as I was. That night, as I locked up the house and went to bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a deep, genuine contentment. Tomorrow would bring new joys, quiet moments, small pleasures, a life I could finally call my own. What started as a crime scene had become a sanctuary. The money Victoria stole had become my safety net. The son I feared had drifted away had become my closest companion. Victoria had tried to steal my future. But all she really did was delay it. Now, at last, my future belongs to me. And I choose peace.